Welcome to our 78th podcast. Today we'll continue our discussion about adaptable organizations. In this episode, we explore some of the human side of change. This is the second in a four-part series. What's one thing you can do now to build adaptive teams and turn change resistance into resilience? Keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces.
Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. As always, we're so glad to have you with us. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and I am joined by my co-host and co-author and co-everything else, Ben Kleinman. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Hey, everyone. Hey, Rich.
So, Ben, this series that we're doing, right? It's a four-part series. It's September 2025. Companies they're unstable, right? We've got organizations that are trying to navigate a whole lot of changes that are happening, a whole lot of uncertainty. And so we thought we would bring, in these episodes, some discussion around being adaptable, right?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a neat time to bring adaptability into focus, and I think it's a neat experiment to see if we do a little bit of a deeper dive over several episodes, just really unpacking adaptability and the impact of adaptability, how you can make yourself or your teams or your organizations more adaptable, how that benefits you or your teams or your organization, kind of where the limits of your control might be, all of that kind of stuff. And I think it warrants a lot more than just a single episode. So it's great that we're doing this, and we'd love feedback on whether it's a good thing, whether people find value in it, whether people think it's just a lot of fluff or nutter and they'd rather us talk about something else.
Sure. And folks, if you like our podcast, make sure you share it and let other people know. If you have additional information elements, you're like, I totally disagree or whatever, let us know that too, because
Mm-hmm.
we want to make sure that our listeners have the best possible value
Yeah,
from
that's
our
right.
podcast.
And if you disagree, we'll just sick Hermie the attack dog hermit crab on you.
Well, I so for those who don't remember, right, we have Hermie, the HR
Yeah.
hermit crab, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Hermie, being a hermit crab, he changes a lot. He has to adapt. And I think that's one of
He
the
does.
nice parts about even the whole cast of characters, right? They're all animals and organic, and they need to adapt to their environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Boss Beta might think differently, but that's maybe an episode for a different day.
Maybe he's had to
Yeah.
adapt to a few things in the book and in the cartoon series. So
I like to think of the boss as being one who gets others to adapt.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, yeah. A good. We've talked about you know transactional versus transformational leadership and all
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. Having somebody who is at the helm that, well, Ben, let's put this in the perspective of teams, right? Um, and some of the research out there says that a team, um, work group that is focused on a specific set of tasks, right? They need to have a leader that provides them, the ability to adapt, right? And
I guess I'm not sure that I see that everywhere. I mean, that may very well be an ideal state. I'm not
Sure,
sure that I see that everywhere in my travels as a consultant. I feel like some teams are very much given the space to adapt, and the better leaders I've seen, even if it's a fairly small team, will empower their team members to bring new ideas to the table, or to always feel free to suggest better ways of working, or suggest process improvements, things like that.
sure.
um, they're always encouraging their team members to learn and grow as professionals within the organization, even if they know that eventually that member will outgrow the team, if you will, and they're
Hmm.
usually very happy for that person. And I've seen the flip side where managers don't really care much about that kind of stuff, and they just want their team to execute day in and day out the same thing over and over again, and they don't
Right.
really care as much about personal growth, team growth, process improvement, organizational improvement. They're very much just like heads down, meet the numbers, and don't rock the boat type stuff.
Sure.
So I've seen it both ways, and
Yeah.
I prefer the idealized state far more than the other. But I guess
Well,
I would defer to you. What's the literature say about all that?
well, some of the literature here that we pulled. So this was Alviani and Associates at last year said that workforce adaptability includes being proactive, being adaptable, right, and being resilient. And these happen when there is some degree of autonomy given to the people who are within a team, collaboration, fostering collaboration, which is not always, honestly, there. When you look at conflict styles, that's not always the most efficient way of doing things, right? So sometimes that's where we have to have a little more of those transactional leadership styles come in, but autonomy, collaboration, and then fostering learning, right? So I think that those lessons learned logs that you're supposed to collect at the end of a project, come in handy.
Yeah,
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 definitely. I mean, there's so much in there we could unpack, from that
sure,
whole theoretical approach.
sure.
Do you do you want to dig into that a little bit more, or do we want to take a step back and maybe look at the macro level picture first, in terms of what are we considering an adaptable team to be? How are we defining an adaptable team? Why one would want that versus a more static? I don't know what the best opposite of that would be. Would it be static or rigid or inflexible?
Well,
And then
I think that begs the question of why do we have to be adaptable, right? And
yeah.
so it's just from we've talked about different motivational theories before, right? One of those being Maslow, right? The hierarchy of needs, your physiological needs, your stability needs, and so on up until um, your realization of yourself, right? Self actualization.
Mhm.
Um, but that second level of stability is that we are wired to want to have stability. Not only are humans wanting that, but like organizations want to have some degree of feeling like there's some stability there. Because if you're not, there's a huge amount of, well, I shouldn't say always huge, but there is a certain degree of risk, right? And so
Yeah.
there's this need to mitigate that risk.
Do you have ways within the world of organizational development and kind of organizational measurements of assessing that level of stability within an organization that are pretty well accepted? I mean, do you look at measures like turnover, or returns over a certain amount of time from investments, and maybe losses, or um, gains from specific initiatives that they've announced, and things like that?
Yeah, I think I mean, my experience when I've come into a project, there's some sense of there's there's some need to get us back on track, to get us just back to some degree of stability, right? Um, but that assessment part, I think, is very important. And there are a few different assessments that I've used out there to do that. I mean, some of it certainly stems from KPIs, benchmarking certain KPIs, like you said, like there's engagement. Oh, go ahead.
KPI.
Oh, okay, man, I already threw out an
We need a
acronym.
bell. We need a
I know.
bell.
Yeah. So
All right. For those of you who are just watching for the first time, we always try to define our acronyms and three-letter words and three-letter acronyms,
that's
things
right.
like that. So Rich threw out KPIs, which stands
Key
for.
key performance indicators.
Thank you, sir. Proceed.
Yes, right. Thank you. Thank you for checking me on that. So yeah, these key performance indicators, those are these usually quantitative measures, right? That tell us how the organization is doing in certain aspects. But some of those, like you said, turnover and uh, productivity, the degree of quality that comes out of
Mm,
a production line or a, a team project, those types of things. But there are also some assessments that are like individual or group assessments that can be administered. In fact, we do. I'm going to do a little shameless plug because there is.
plug it.
So we do have this.
There's no shameless plugs,
Yeah,
Rich.
right.
There's
That
no
yeah,
shameless
yeah. We're
plugs.
we're all about the branding on this one. So AdaptX, which one of our guests, my former professor, Dr. Casey DeBryan, uh, you know, has given us the license for AdaptX, and there are some assessments within that program that help to assess the degree of adaptability within the organization, and specifically starts to look at like team structure, the degree of autonomy. There's some leadership assessments, and I think those are things that organizations that need to know what their capabilities are. If you're doing a SWOT analysis, right? So there we go. There's another one, right? Strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So your strengths and your weaknesses, those internal components that you need to assess. Um, and when we look at that, we want to figure out um, what can we build on and what do we need to improve. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. And is the Adaptex primarily used organizationally or individually? If that makes sense, is it primarily used as an individual assessment or more at that organizational level?
It's mostly focused on the org level, but there are
Okay.
some individual components to it because I think
Okay.
that's an important. I'm glad you asked that because there's an important aspect to knowing who you have on the team, who's on the proverbial bus, and then the which proverbial seat it is. I think that's Jim Collins from Good to Great. Uh, and then there's how does everybody act together? What's the
Uh-huh.
what's that
Uh-huh.
group
Okay.
dynamic like?
Yeah. In the past episode, we talked a little bit about some of the other types of assessments, and some of those we mentioned get more focused on the personal
The personal,
and
yeah,
how a person thinks about change, how a person enacts change, how a person reacts to change. And so those can be a nice complement to that organizational type
right,
of thing.
sure,
And then there are a ton of assessments that maybe we could talk about when you're wanting to form a team, or let's say right size or right adapt a team, readaptabilize a team so that it's more adaptable, and there are ways to assess whether someone's going to be a good fit for a team that you already have that's humming and you don't want to disrupt it, and you just want to keep it going
Sure.
and maybe even growing as opposed to detracting from that momentum.
Yep. Yep.
But maybe we'll take a break and come back and dig in a little bit more.
I like it. All right. We'll be right back.
Meet Hermie the HR Hermit Crab. Laugh, learn, and lead better with Hermie. Hermie is here to tackle workplace madness with heart and humor from Harmonious Workplaces. He's perfect for HR pros, leaders, and change makers. Hermie teaches workplace lessons through cartoons and is great for team discussions and workshops. Get your copy on Amazon now. www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com. Again, that's hermiehrhermitcrab.com.
And we're back. So, Ben, we're talking about adaptability, specifically in this episode, focusing a little more on teams, and some of the, like, how do we build adaptable teams, right? And so we were asking about some assessments and stuff like that. In your experience, right? And you work with teams all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
you I like the way that you put it before, where you're like the person in the, what do they call those, the controllers on the tarmac.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I knew what their title was,
I
but
don't know what
yeah,
that is either, but
those those folks with the orange cones,
right,
orange, basically like mini lightsabers,
right,
orange flashlights that wave planes in on the tarmac into the gate.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
Sometimes it feels like that,
yeah,
and sometimes it feels like you're just trying to get the plane out of the gate.
mm,
Like you've got everybody stuffed into the aircraft. There's enough food to get them from point A to point B. They've
sure.
done their pre-flight check 17 times, and you just need to get that plane out of the gate. And for whatever reason, you're just you're the one with shoulder to airplane nose.
And when are you ever involved in, like, the building of a team in that respect, or yeah,
Yeah, sometimes I've seen it where we've looked at an initiative and we've thought about the type of person one would want on a team or the
right,
type of person one would want in a specific role. And so you look at maybe not at that point specific individuals, but the characteristics or personality traits that you'd
sure,
want in a role. Um, that I've seen.
that makes sense. Yeah,
And then you've had it where you've had teams that someone is going to roll off, or there's going to be a big change to the team in terms of the organization is announcing a sort of restructuring, or they're shifting chess pieces on the board. And so then you have to think about, how are we going to take this team that's doing things that are important and adjust who's on the team, who's doing specific roles, so that we don't lose the thread of the team in terms of what they were doing, why they were doing it, how they were doing it. We don't crater momentum or people's motivation, things like that.
sure. So there is this level of the individual assessment, even if it's not as formal as some of the other ones that are out there, but understanding the competencies of the individuals that
Hmm.
could be candidates to be part of the team.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah,
then there's the overall team dynamic of how is everybody going to work and what their work package is going to be and all that. Is that fair?
yeah, yeah.
Well,
No, that's
yeah.
a good way to say it.
Well, that
And I think on on projects where I've seen more healthy dialogue, most of the people on the team know what most of the other people on the team are good at and what those roles are meant to do. And so there are some roles that are very tactical, operational, execution focused, just keeping X, Y, or Z moving along and focused on just getting specific things done. There are other
Sure.
people that are looking a little bit more higher level strategy and more dialogue-y type of things, as
Mm,
opposed to in the weeds talking with a vendor or entering data into a spreadsheet or calculating this or that. And so most people on a team know who's going to be a good person for which type of role,
sure.
and the type of person or the type of characteristics one would want if one is backfilling that role, or if one's distributing that role to other members on the team who would be best to pick up which types of things.
Well, and I like that you're talking about different people, because there's a lot of research that supports diversity within the team, from a variety of different levels, right? But
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
having groups that are all, I mean, everybody should be aligned to the vision, right? I mean, there's certainly that's an important part. But if you start to get into groupthink because everybody is there's nobody challenging the process, and you all have everybody with the same competencies or personalities or all that stuff, right? That that can cause things to go sideways, if that's fair to say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And and I don't. Have you ever seen it where there's groupthink even on a team that's working really well, and even in a situation, an organization where things are going really well and everything is positive? It's not necessarily a groupthink of negativity or groupthink of the bosses told us to do X and we're just going to do X because that's what the boss says, and we're all just yes people around the boss.
Sure.
But where something is really working quite well and everyone is excited about that, and they're
Right.
sort of just carrying that forward with enthusiasm, but there's no one perturbing that and saying, can we do it even better? Are there things that maybe we should be asking our customers or clients or end users, or however you think about who you're doing whatever you're doing for, to just keep improving and make it better, or do something a little bit differently, or instead of maybe a blue button, make it a green button or
Hmm.
something like that. Instead of just selling oranges, maybe we sell pears too. And it, I found that groupthink is not always seen in just that negative
Sure.
way. There can be positive elements of teams that still fall into that groupthink mindset.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's at some point when it becomes less of a project, more operational, right? Where
Hmm.
you're now, because that's just that's stability, right? That's when something becomes enculturated,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And that's what we're trying to go for, right? So there is going to be some element of excuse me, some element of groupthink that's going to happen there, because everybody's moving along the same,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, but I think I think you hit it on the head there with there's sometimes you need somebody to come in and shake it up, because we become comfortable with the status quo, right? And that may not be the answer to more efficiency, more effectiveness within the organization, right? So, um,
How I'm sorry, finish your
no, go
thought and
ahead.
then I have a
No,
question
no,
for you.
go ahead. Go ahead.
How have you seen it where in situations that work really well, you have someone who comes in and who intentionally perturbs that enculturation
Yep.
so that the team does not start to become too rigid? And
Right.
how does that person do it so that the team continues to stay adaptable in a good way?
Yeah. Uh, so I've seen it where you will have somebody who may be, how do I put it, that they may be some kind of a detractor, right, within the organization.
Sure.
They see what's happening, and they are not content with the outcomes for whatever reason. Oftentimes it can be somebody like in customer service,
Hmm.
right, where they go, hey, we're having all these complaints about this, that, or the other thing, or somebody in sales who's like, I can't close this particular, this particular product or
Mhm.
whatever because of the way things are structured, or
Yeah.
um, so
You might see it in quality where people are seeing lots of customer calls about defects or
right,
preferences.
yeah, yep. So bringing in those people who can be change agents, who can actually they are doing John Cotter's first part of creating a sense of urgency.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I think that can bring in some of those people into a team that could be more of a task force to at least look at the problem, right? It can be remarkably effective. Um, and when you have somebody who comes in and does that, right, then you have to start thinking of who can we bring in to fix what's going on, right? So you may have to shake up the team a little bit and move, this nice cozy group of people who have, really gelled together. You might have to bring in some people who develop some conflict, if that makes, but healthy conflict, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah,
Do we have a sense, or does the literature have a sense of what defines a good adaptable team? And I know you were talking before earlier on in our episode about what what some of those characteristics are, but is there any kind of a measure or metric or a definition of what a healthy adaptable team is, as
yeah,
opposed to just a team?
sure. Well, why don't I answer that question when we come back from another break?
Okay.
All right. We'll be right back.
Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. At Harmonious Workplaces, we believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well-executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how harmonious workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.
And we're back. So, Ben, before we went to the break, you were asking about what some of the research says about adaptability and specifically as it pertains to teams. And there actually are some measurements that have come up even in research as late as last year, um, that talk about job autonomy, right? So allowing people to do what they do in the way that they do it. There's some degree of that. Cross training. So um, I think there's part of uh, the group think discussion, right, and all that is when you have uh, when you have cross-functional teams, which is not always going to be the case,
Mhm.
but when you do have some cross-functional teams, you are helping to deliver. You're adding a little complexity into your team situation. Don't get me wrong, but you're also offering opportunities for cross training for people to understand and learn from other people. Um, there needs to be some degree of shared vision so that and there are some assessments there. Am I clear about the vision? Some of those assessments that can be done verbally, or there are actual written instruments that can get you some clarity on that. And then management support, of course. Those are so job autonomy, cross training, shared vision, management support. Those can be some of the key enablers of workforce adaptability, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And then does that all sort of resolve down into a adaptability number, if you will? So we could look at, is this team considered an adaptable team? Is this team considered a sort of adaptable team? Is this team considered fairly rigid or inflexible?
Yep. Well, I think instead of something that's Boolean like yes or no, there's certainly degrees of
Maybe more scalar, sure.
yeah, exactly. Right. So
Okay.
that because when you have the scale, then you can figure out what again, kind of going back to the SWOT, right? The from the standpoint of what strengths do we have, what weaknesses do we have, what opportunities do we have to um, fortify ourselves
Hmm.
to reduce the amount of weakness. You know,
Right. And then if we look at that and we say, okay, relative to our competitors or relative to other parts of our organization, we see this one team or this one function has a bit of rigidity. We want to make this team or this function more adaptable. We think that will benefit the organization overall. And we put some play some structures in that will help make it more adaptable.
hmm
We give people training, we help them see the vision, we help get the right people on the team. If they're not on the team, we help incentivize people. We would then see that metric, hopefully that adaptability metric for that team, start to trend in a positive way.
sure,
Are there then sort of ways that we would expect to see that play out in the organization, in terms of like we were talking about before, we would eventually see it resulting in sales being closed, or fewer customer complaints,
hmm
or fewer product defects. At the end of the day, what's the benefit of doing all of this? Is maybe I think what
Well,
I'm trying
yeah.
to.
I mean, I think it comes down to um, how do I put this? Getting to a point where uh, the at least the team has adapted, right? And has created a new normal, right? We've talked about that, through change. So we're in a new state of of being normal, at least for that team, right? And then um, is there some degree of that needs to be rolled out to the rest of the organization, right? And help them to adapt, right? Does that answer your question? I mean, I I think it usually has to start small, right? And you have to build the momentum, the the proverbial flywheel of change, right? You've got to get that spinning and expand out from there.
Yeah, I think it does partially, and I guess what I'm not, maybe I'm not asking well or phrasing well. The idea that you're doing all of these things to improve a team, but
Right.
at the end of the day, you're doing it presumably because you like people and you want your people in your organization to thrive and do well and all that. But
Sure.
you also want to be closing more sales, reducing defects,
Right.
reducing costs of returns, or you want to be improving your internal innovation or process development so that your products are being internally bettered in a more efficient way, some sort of tangible market realizable outcome.
Sure.
You're at the end of the day, reducing costs or increasing sales is sort of a very crude way to look at it, but
Right.
that's
Right.
often what people are looking for.
Yeah.
Are we closing more deals? Are we
Right.
reducing our costs?
Well, there's the why, going back to our first acronym of the day, right, is identifying those key performance indicators, right? Identifying the metrics that require the organization to adapt, right? So in getting a baseline there, um, and then continuing to measure
Hmm.
what outcomes we have, and continuously
Yeah.
have that feedback coming back to what are those original numbers, and what statistically what's the trends that we have, um, happening as a result of the group of, let's just say the specific team, but that the ability for that team to be able to help the organization to adapt and achieve some level of improvement I think that's when we have to look at, well, now how do we help the rest of the organization to do the same, if that's even required, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So if I'm staying with very crude metrics, we might be looking at revenue, and we
Mhm.
might be saying we want to see if we can increase revenue or decrease our costs. And then we might be looking at metrics internally, such as how are our teams performing, and we
Mhm.
can assess them based on some of the assessment tools we've talked about in this episode and in prior episodes. And then we can see, are there ways to improve our team's adaptability that would increase revenue or decrease costs? And so it's a pairing or a linking of different metrics, different team performance indicators, organizational performance indicators, and seeing if increasing or decreasing one will result in the increase or decrease of another.
Sure.
And then
Sure.
that means you have to have, like you were saying, you need that baseline, and then you need some sort of continuous assessment, reassessment,
Right.
and evaluation.
Right. But
Okay, that stitches it together.
to go back to one of our previous guests, though, Dan Pinkham, I think it can't be as crude as just revenue, or just, you know uh, something like that, right? Like, it's that there has to be some analysis to be more specific. So I think he's talked about, five whys, and some of the other uh,
Yeah, for sure. I'm
analytic tools.
oversimplifying just
Yeah.
for the sake of making it easy my very small brain to track how looking at a team can be tied to some sort of measure that a CEO might
Yeah.
really be focused on, or your analysts might be focused on, or the
Right.
market or your customers,
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Cool.
sure. Does it matter if a team is sort of standing functional unit, or if a team is a transitional project focused team in
Mm,
terms of measuring adaptability or tracking adaptability, hiring for that team? You might not, if you have a project team, you might not hire for that. You might
sure.
just pull people from different functions and say this is now 10% of your job for the next 6 months. Does it does the way we adaptabilize that team matter if it's one versus the other?
Well, I don't, Ben, that you just, like, we're nearing the end of this episode, and you just opened up a whole nother episode.
Oh,
I think, I
well,
think,
then maybe
I
maybe
think,
that's something we think about addressing
yeah,
on our next podcast.
yeah, because I think that's a really good question, when it comes to your evaluating your organization design, is what makes sense to have that as a standing part of the organization, that as
Hmm.
an institution, and what is transient that, is more of a task force or something to that effect. So,
Yeah, or a project team.
yeah,
And it leads me to think that in some cases you might want one to be more adaptable than the other, and that
makes
might
sense.
depend on certain things happening in the org, certain things happening in the market.
Right.
And so it's not always that you'd want a project team to be made up of very, very adaptable people and standing functional units to be made up of less adaptable people
Sure.
or people who are just not asked to adapt. You might want it completely the flip side. So
Right.
love it.
Right.
Teeing it up for next time.
All right. Sounds great. Well, thanks
Cool.
everybody for joining us for today's episode. Again, like, share, comment. Please let us know what you think. Get
Yeah.
Hermie the HR Hermit Crab on Amazon and follow us at HermieHRHermitCrab.com. Uh,
Right. Or send Hermie your questions about anything. Hermie can talk for sure about adaptability and answer your adaptability questions.
that's right. And
Hermie
that's
can
it.
also respond very delicately to any constructive criticism you might have.
Yes, he has a way with that sometimes. So you can actually go and harmoniousworkplaces.com/ask Hermie and ask your question, and he will respond one way or the other. So for sure.
And how often do you get a crab telling you what to do?
That's right. Not very. We do. We get it all the time, but that's our Herbie. So,
There you go.
all right, Ben, you want to take us out today?
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Until next time, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode.